Hi there, welcome to another college math video. In this video, we're going to go through the first section of our chapter on logic. The study of logic is a branch of math that is probably something that you haven't seen before if you've never taken any liberal arts classes before. So this chapter will not really involve any computations. It's really just deciding whether or not statements as a whole are true or false based on their premises or different combinations of the premises being true and false. So I like to suggest that during this chapter, you try to think of yourself as a lawyer. And so sometimes I'll have a statement there that you feel like I already know that's a true statement because I know this, this, and this. If you were a lawyer being told any statement, you wouldn't accept anything as fact until you could prove it. So I want you to take any biases you have towards anything, and it doesn't mean we're going to talk about anything controversial. It's just you have to take all biases, what you think you know about things, off the table and assume every statement that's made is something that you don't know if it's true or false. And then we're going to run through potentially what it looks like if it is true or false and all the combinations that come with it. So the objectives for this first section, as is the case with most first sections, first, review the terms associated with logical connectives, identify types of statements, and then write negations and convert between symbolic form and words. Big picture in the chapter, that's something that we're going to do a bit of. We'll kind of jump back and forth between that. This first section is just the introduction and where we'll do the translations and learn which of the connectives we're going to be using in the chapter. Okay, so for the notes, some preliminary notes to get us ready. The first note we'll talk about is a statement. So any statement is a sentence that can be judged true or false. And truthfully, in the real world, certainly there's lots of gray areas, but within the study of logic, we take the two extremes. It's either true or false, and those are the only two things we look at. We don't look at any of that middle ground. Okay, then we have two types of statements that we will see throughout the chapter. Simple and compound statements. A simple statement conveys one idea. We won't see many of those, but we'll certainly see them. And we'll also see compound statements, which convey two or more ideas. For the most part, we'll be seeing compound statements. But again, the whole idea, any statement that we see is just a sentence that can be judged true or false. That sentence might have many different components that can be true or false. That's where the ideas come into play. If it's a simple statement, then only one idea will exist there. If it's compound, there'll be two or more that we can deem true or false, and then see what those implications are. All right, so let's look at the connectives. We're going to look at 5 total throughout the chapter. The first one and the second one are on this slide, conjunction and disjunction. Symbolically, a conjunction is an upside down V. It is a down symbol. And the definition for a conjunction means that both events take place. Both events take place. You can sort of think of this as being similar to sets in that it is the same as basically seeing and in a statement. And it translates to and. Good news. Remember, the symbol for and in sets was an upside down U. Here in logic, it's a V instead, upside down V. So they both carry the same weight, the same kind of idea. Conjunction connects, let's add that as a note also. Connects ideas with the word and. Okay, then we have a disjunction. The symbol for a disjunction is a V, just a standard V pretty much. And a disjunction means one, the other, or both events take place. And good news, this is the same as or from sets. Remember the or symbol was a U for union. This is a V. Looks very similar. They have the same idea of being either up or down and being connected there. And a disjunction connects ideas with the word or. So keep in mind, something that we're going to do in this video is translate from symbols to words and vice versa, from words to symbols. So if we're coming from the symbols and we see the down sign, we'll know that the word connecting the ideas is and. If we see the V, the up sign, we'll know that the word connecting them is or. Now, let's talk a little bit about the word or, because truthfully, in the English language, when we say the word or and, they're two tiny words that we breeze by, and we don't really attach too much meaning to them. Certainly, they have meaning, but there's a differentiation to be made. So there's the exclusive or. Let's talk specifically about or. If we say exclusive or, we mean one or the other. An example of this is deciding whether you're going to wear sandals or gym shoes. It can't be both. Exclusive or means one or the other. Take your pick. It's got to be one or the other. Exclusively this or exclusively that. Where inclusive or means one, the other, or both. An example of this: going to buy a car and walking in and saying, I want a car with heat or air conditioning. When you go in and say that, you certainly are saying you'd be happy with a car that had just heat. You'd be happy with a car that had air conditioning, and you would also definitely take a car that had both. It's different to say or in that case than it is to say the exclusive or. You don't mean you want one or the other and you will not take both, or that it's not possible. So this is just a note to have. Whenever you see the word or through the study of logic, assume that it is the inclusive or. As the definition says, one, the other, or both events take place. So whenever we see the word or, just assume it's inclusive. The only time that it's going to be the exclusive is if you see the word exclusive in the sense exclusively this or that, then you'll know. I don't really think that that's going to happen, but inclusive is definitely the one that you want to stay focused on. All right, so these are the first two of the connectives: conjunction, disjunction. The third one is a negation. Symbolically, it looks like a little tilde mark, but it would go in front of the letter. So if we saw something like this, the sign is happening in front. Students often tell me this looks like an N when I'm drawing it. It's not, it's just I'm exaggerating the curve a little bit more, but that is the symbol. And the negation is simply read as not. This is the least complicated of the 5 that we're going to look at. It's simply the opposite. And this is also similar to complement from sets, where if it either is or it isn't. So if you start out with the positive version, like this example, I have a dog, the negation of that would be I don't have a dog. It's the two extremes. You either do or you don't. So the negation of this would be I don't have a dog. You could write, I do not have a dog. Any variation of that sentence where you're conveying the message, you do not have a dog, would totally be fine. All right, so this is negation. Negation has one other special note to make with it, and that is the special negation, special forms of negations. So there's the few, and I want to be clear, for the most part, you're going to see these simple ideas. I have a dog, the opposite being I don't have a dog. For the most part, it is going to be that simple. But some negations are a little bit more complicated to make. Like if I were to say, all of my students are pizza lovers. It's not the opposite. It is certainly one form of the opposite to say none of my students like pizza, but it's not necessarily the case. So you can think of filling in this chart and any sort of negation. How do you prove me wrong? Imagine that you're in a fight with someone. How do you prove them wrong? If I make the statement, all of my students are pizza lovers, what makes me wrong? Again, it's not the total far end opposite of none are pizza lovers. If there's only one person in my class that's not a pizza lover, then I'm wrong. My statement, all of my students are pizza lovers, is wrong. So the opposite of all are is some are not. If some of my students are not, then I'm wrong. I really like to think of this part as making you good at arguing. So the opposite of all are is some are not. The thing that makes all are wrong is some are not. Okay, the next form of a statement is the other kind of initial extreme. If I say, none of my students are pizza lovers, what makes me wrong? Again, it's not the extreme opposite of all are. If I say, none of you are pizza lovers, the opposite of that is, well, if some of you are, then I'm wrong. So some are is the negation of a statement that is none are. And then the last two, you can guess what those would be. If the initial statement is some are, if I say some of my students are pizza lovers, the thing that makes me wrong is if none of my students are pizza lovers. So opposite of some are is none are. And the last one, if I say some of my students are not pizza lovers, the only way I'm wrong is if, in fact, all of my students are pizza lovers. All are. So you'll notice that really if you can deal with the first two lines, then you've got the whole thing. The bottom two lines are just starting from one end, from the opposite end, and going back to the beginning. But again, let me reiterate, for the most part, when you see negations, it's going to be these very basic ideas. But these special negations, these special forms of negation, they'll pop up from time to time, and they're actually really good ways to be able to debate someone. All right, so the third of our connectives is the negation. Let's go on to the fourth and fifth, which is the conditional statement and the biconditional statement. 4 and 5. Conditional statement, the symbol that you'll see is an arrow pointing in one direction. And a conditional statement would look like this. This is how it would be read. If, there'll be one idea, if blah, 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 then something else. So this is where there'll be ideas that can be true or false plugged in here. But a conditional statement will always say if something, then something else. The first part is called the antecedent. And the second part is called the consequence. Typically, I'll just refer to them as the first part and the second part. But those are their technical names. Whatever comes in this beginning piece, antecedent, whatever's at the end, consequence. An example of this, just so you can start to see what this would look like. If you have a beating heart, then you are alive. So the two ideas that can potentially be true or false, you have a beating heart, you are alive. Connected with if-then, one of the connectives. All right, and the fifth and final one that we'll see throughout this chapter is the biconditional. The biconditional is read as a first statement, if and only if a second statement. Potentially some odd wording that you're not used to, but this is the connective, if and only if. And you can think of the biconditional as two different things kind of leading back and forth into each other. The first thing leads to the second leads back into the first. Both things kind of happen simultaneously. There's your biconditional. No specific name for those first two pieces because technically they're supposed to be interchangeable. The wording doesn't always sound right if you change them, but the idea is that the two things are supposed to be interchangeable. And an example of this, you will pass if and only if you study. Things that can be true or false in the statement: you will pass. You could either pass or not pass. And then studying: you could or you could not study. Now, me making this example statement using that connective, it's not saying that there's no implication on what would happen if you don't pass, if you don't study, because certainly you could pass and you could have not studied, or you could not pass and you could have studied a lot. What we're concerned with here, you're a lawyer, I'm just making this statement, you're concerned with what are the things in this statement that can be deemed true or false, and then we're going to run through all those scenarios. So these are the 5. The next video will look at the first of the 3 in a lot more detail, and then the following video will look at conditional and biconditional in a lot more detail. The rest of this video is going to be looking at the translations back and forth, and then after all the logic or all the truth tables and everything, it'll all come back together, the translations and the truth tables. So let's look at making translations with these 5. One special note before we go into those examples, and this is because we're leading into the examples where we're translating, taking symbols and turning them into sentences, or sentences and turning them into symbols. This is an important note that may not make the most sense now, but you'll see when we make the translations. So parentheses indicate where a comma goes. And a comma indicates where parentheses go. Initially, our statements won't be as complex, but in the real world, statements are very complex. So we have to be able to deal with long statements symbolically and in words. And so you'll see that the comma is really going to be helpful in telling you when to differentiate and when to kind of pull things together. So parentheses tell you where a comma goes. Comma tells you where parentheses go. This is for each translation back and forth. All right, so the examples. So we're looking at the statement, we're going to write the requested compound statement. So we're going to translate it to words. And then we're also going to tell what kind of statement we have there. So of the 5. So do we have conjunction, disjunction, negation, conditional, biconditional? And the answer might be more than one of those. So the ideas that we're going to use here, idea P will always be you graduate college. Idea Q, you earn good grades. Idea R, you attend class. So anytime you see that letter, it corresponds to the idea that is listed there. So the first one we have is negation P. The first thing we're going to do is tell what kind of statement we have. So which of the 5? So for us to have a conjunction, we would need the down symbol. Disjunction, we need the up symbol. Negation, we need a little tilde. We have that. So here we have a negation. Conditional would have the arrow. Biconditional would have the double arrow. So in this case, we only have a negation. Now let's actually make that translation. So symbols, it's negation P. So we want the opposite of statement P. Statement P is you graduate college. So negation P is you don't graduate college. Any form of that sentence that conveys the message you don't graduate college is fine. You didn't graduate college, that works. You do not graduate college, totally works. And there's nothing special about that negation. It's not any of those specific forms, all are, none are. It's nothing fancy. You either do graduate college or you don't. Not any in between. Okay, the next one we have P, that symbol means or, and then R. So go through the list. Which of the 5 do we have? we have the up symbol. So we have a disjunction. Disjunction. And that's the only symbol that we have there besides the letters. And a disjunction means the two ideas are connected with the word or. So we have statement P or statement R. So just fill in what exactly that says. Statement P, you graduate college. Or statement R, you attend class. The sentences in these translations aren't always going to sound great, and even in the homework, they're going to sometimes pick ideas that have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and it's done on purpose. I've chosen some ideas that have something to do with each other, college, grades, and attending class, but you have preconceived notions about if earning grades means, or getting good grades means you attended class, means you'll graduate college, and you can't let any of those things bog you down. All you're worried about is the translation, and then what kind of statement do you have. Long-term, identifying the type of statement isn't really going to be a big thing. We're just going to refer to it as a disjunction and move on. But in the beginning, I want to get us used to it, so we're going to identify which of the connectives we have. All right, on the next slide, we're going to continue using the same P, Q, and R. Okay, so the next one we have Q, the up symbol, R. Uh-oh, did I do the last one wrong? Up again? No. Okay, good. All right, so again we have a disjunction. Since we have the up symbol, which means the two ideas are connected with the word or. So Q or R, idea Q is you earn good grades, idea R, you attend class. So Q, you earn good grades. Or you attend class. Don't let any ideas you have on what it means to be earning good grades, attending class affect this. The whole thing with the word or doesn't mean good grades or attending class. It's you could earn good grades, you could attend class, or you could do both. Technically, all those things could happen. All right, let's do a different color in the middle there. The next one, which of the 5 connectives do you see in this symbolic statement? I see 2. We have the down symbol, which is a conjunction, means the ideas are pulled together with the word and. And then I also see a negation. Negation. Now that negation is only applied to one idea. So let's also identify the big picture of this statement. Is the big picture the negation or is the big picture the conjunction? I know it's hard to tell at this point, but the big picture is the conjunction. The negation is only being applied to one idea. You'll see further down, the negation is applying to an entire statement. So if it's only applied to one idea, the negation is typically not the main focus of the statement. The conjunction is, so we have something and something else. So the first something is negation R. Statement R is you attend class, so negation R is you don't attend class. You don't attend class. And statement P, which is you graduate college. Two separate things. This is not an if you do this, then something else. Just this and this. These are two things that both could occur. One could, not the other. Since it's pulled together with and, it would mean we want both things to occur. But don't take it to mean anything for your college experience. Okay, the next one. Which of the 5 connectives do we have in this problem? There's only one symbol, the double arrows. That's your biconditional. And a biconditional connects two ideas with the phrase if and only if in the middle. So first thing, if and only if, second thing. So we have statement Q, which is you earn good grades. If and only if. Statement R, you attend class. Remember, a biconditional is supposed to have two things leading back and forth into each other. So earning good grades means attending class means earning good grades. So technically in a biconditional, the sentence should carry the same meaning if the two are flipped. In this case, it does sound okay. It sounds okay. You attend class if and only if you earn good grades. But the idea is there. All right, the next one. Which kind of connectives do we see in this problem? I see more than one negation. You don't have to list it more than once, but I see negations. And then I also see the conditional arrow. So since there's more than one, let's decide which one's the big picture of the statement. The negations are just individually applied. So in this case, it's going to be the conditional. Remember, the conditional is set up as if one thing, then something else. So we have if, negation R, then negation Q. So let's just fill in those pieces. If, negation R, statement R is you attend class, so negation R is you don't attend class. Then, negation Q, you don't earn good grades. This is a statement I'd like to believe is true, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Certainly there are people who don't come to class and do fine. There are people who don't attend or do attend class and then don't have good grades. All combinations of this apply. You're not concerned with making a judgment of true-false on the statement I've presented. You're going to run through all possible scenarios eventually. Okay, and then the last one on this slide, we have the negation of Q and R. Down simple is your and, your conjunction. So we have a negation. Let's go back to right. We have a negation and we have a conjunction. Okay, so what's the big picture of this statement? It's kind of hard to tell in this case, and it's, I suppose, really, I don't know, up to your judgment what you think it would be. But to make this translation, a negation applied to the outside means it's the opposite of everything that's inside. And now you might be wondering, well, can I just negate each one individually? Not necessarily. For a statement like this, for it to formally translate to be exactly the same, the negation on the outside can simply translate to, it is not true that, comma, and then say everything else. When we preface a sentence like this, it means everything that comes after this is not true. So we've set it up, it is not true that, and then everything that's in that parentheses. Now you'll notice, for the first time, we've had a parentheses in our symbolic form, and when we translate, it becomes a comma in our sentence. This indicates everything that comes after this, or potentially before it, is stuff that should be kind of grouped together. There's only one idea in front, it's not true that. So the two ideas that come after will know, oh, it's not true that, these are the two things that are not true. So we have Q and R. Idea Q, you earn good grades. And idea R, you attend class. Again, you can't just necessarily distribute that negative. It doesn't quite work like that. We'll look at that a little bit later as a possibility, but at this point, we're just making a formal translation of what we see from symbols to words. So this was going one direction. This was taking symbols and going to words. We're going to do a few examples where we go the other way. And this is all going to be under the same umbrella of those ideas P, Q, and R. Okay, so we have the statement in words. If you graduate college, then you earn good grades. So the first thing I would suggest is deciding which of the connectives we see. Do we see any negations from our initial statements? Graduate college, earn good grades, attend class. There's no negations. We'll stick with that. Do we see any conjunctions? Do we see any ideas connected with the word and? No. Do we see any disjunctions? Ideas connected with or? No. Do we see any if-thens? If something, then something else. In this case, we do. So we have conditional. And do we see anything with a if and only if? We don't. So conditional is our only symbol. So when we take this sentence and translate it to words, the if then tells us there's an arrow. Then we have the first piece, the second piece. So if the first piece is you graduate college, we already have letters for this. So graduating college, according to our example, is idea P. Then the second piece, you earn good grades. According to our initial example, this is idea Q. So P implies Q. This is what it would look like symbolically. And we've gone backwards. We started with the symbols and translated to words. We're going the other way now. Okay, the next idea. You don't graduate college if and only if you don't earn good grades. Okay, so do we see any negations? Are any of our initial ideas negated? Do we see the opposite of them? Graduate college, I see don't graduate college, so that would be a negation. Do we see any conjunctions, any ideas connected with the word and? We definitely do in this case. There's an and. Do we see any ideas connected with the word, ooh, not conjunction, hello, that's if and only if. Take that out, so no and there. Any connected with the word or? We don't. Do we have an if this, then that? We don't. Do we have an if and only if? There it is, if and only if. We do, so this is a biconditional. Okay. Then of those two, we have to decide which one is the main idea of the statement. Typically, it's not the negation, unless the negation is, it is not true that, but even still then it's kind of hard to say. The biconditional is the big idea. So this is your arrow in both directions. Biconditional is one idea, if and only if, other idea. So what's the first idea? You don't graduate college. What does that translate to symbolically? Graduate college is P, so don't graduate college is negation P. If and only if, arrow in both directions, you don't earn good grades. Idea Q is you earn good grades, so don't earn good grades is negation Q. And this is what it would look like symbolically. Okay, one more from words to symbols, and then we're going to do one more going the opposite direction, just so we can really see it in a big way. You don't earn good grades, and you don't graduate college. All right, so what kind of connectives? Do we see any negations, any of our individual basic ideas negated? We definitely do. Don't earn good grades, don't graduate college. Those are the opposite of our initial ideas. Do we see any conjunctions, ideas separated or pulled together with the word and? We do in this case. Just and, not if and, only if. This one's conjunction. Any disjunctions? There's nothing connected with or. Is there an if this, then that? No. Is there an if and only if? No. So this is what we have. Then decide again, big picture of the statement. The negations are just applied to individual ideas, so the conjunction will be the big picture. Conjunction is your down, upside down V. So there's a piece before that. You don't earn good grades. Earn good grades is Q, so don't earn good grades is negation Q. And then don't graduate college, negation P. So there's what that one looks like symbolically. All right, one more to words. So we have Q implies negation P or R. Quite a few in this example. So the symbols that we see a negation, we see a conditional, the arrow in one direction, and we see the V, which is our disjunction. Okay, so there's three in this case. Now we have to decide which one is the main idea of this statement. The negations apply to only one piece individually, so we can rule that out right away. The big question, is it the conditional or the disjunction? If you said disjunction, you are correct. The parentheses separates and tells you, oh, this is kind of one thing we're going to think about, even though it has more than one piece. And then it's being pulled together with this other thing, with the word or. So typically, the inside of a parentheses isn't going to be the main idea. It's going to be a component that's just kind of a complicated component. So the big idea is the disjunction. There's one thing or another thing. So what's that first thing? The first thing is the Q implies negation P. So let's translate that first. Simply inside the parentheses, Q implies negation P. It's a conditional, so this means if idea Q, you earn good grades. Then negation P, you don't graduate college. There's that idea. The connector we have, the disjunction, tells us they're going to get pulled together with the word or. And then the second component, R, you attend class. If you earn good grades, then you don't graduate college or you attend class. This is the translation of it. Let go of all the meanings that you have applied to this. It's just the formal translation. It's the process of getting used to this. But there's one thing missing from this sentence to make it fully correct. Remember the special note we had before we started these examples? If you see parentheses, that indicates where a comma is going to go. So the parentheses part translated in yellow, you can put the comma at the end of that piece to kind of tell yourself all of this gets read in one breath. If you earn good grades, then you don't graduate college or you attend class. And it's not one or the other. The or means technically or both. But you get the idea. The parentheses tells you where that comma should go. All right. Okay, so let's do some practice. You're going to do the exact same thing. First say what kind of, which of the 5 you have, which connectives, and then make the translation from symbols to words or vice versa. On this slide, we have symbols to words, and then on this one, words to symbols. So you can pause the video, go through all 6 of these problems. The ideas P, Q, and R are the same for both of them, and then come back and we'll see if we're on the same page. All right, so let's see if what you got is correct. So the first one, we have a negation. And there's actually more than one, but you don't have to list it more than once. And we have a conjunction. So the 2 ideas are being pulled together with the word and. So we have negation R. R is George's major is engineering. We'll do this up here. 1. So negation R. George's major is not engineering. Down symbol, and. Negation P. P, George is enrolled in calculus, so negation of that, George is not enrolled in calculus. All right, first translation. The second one, we have Q implies negation P or R. So we definitely, in this one, see, right up top, a negation. We see a conditional. And we see a disjunction. So what do you think the big picture of the statement is? Big picture. In this case, it's going to be the conditional. Since there's parentheses separating or kind of holding together this piece, it tells us this thing leads to this thing. And that second piece, the consequence, it's just more of a complicated thing. So we make the translation. Statement Q, this is a conditional, so if statement Q, George's major is criminal justice, Then, what's the second piece? Then, negation P or R. Negation P, George is not enrolled in calculus. Or R, George's major is engineering. And there's one thing missing from this. There's a parentheses, so this tells us that a comma has to go somewhere. And we want to separate the ideas. We want the two ideas, negation P or R, to be read in the same breath. So if George's major is criminal justice, then George is not enrolled in calculus, or George's major is engineering. Linguistically, I don't really care if it's supposed to be, if you place it before or after, that's fine. If the mistake happens, I'm not concerned with that. I'm just concerned that there is a comma there to tell me, oh, everything that comes after this should be read in the same breath. So if George's major is criminal justice, then George is not enrolled in calculus, or George's major is engineering. All right, and the third one, we have quite a few symbols here. I see a negation, I see a conjunction, and a disjunction. We have quite a few symbols here. So the question, what's the main symbol in this problem? Since there's quite a few. And let's actually underline. Conditional was the last one. So there's parentheses separating multiple ideas. So that tells us the two ideas being pulled together with those parentheses. The way they're connected is the main idea of the sentence. So in this case, the disjunction is the main idea. So we have this and this, or this and this. That's essentially what's being presented to us in a sentence. So let's make the first parentheses translation, R and P. George's major is engineering. And P, George is enrolled in calculus. That's the first idea read together, so you can put a comma. It's pulled together with the word or. Then the last two ideas, Q and negation P. So Q, George's major is criminal justice. And negation P, George is not enrolled in calculus. Let's fix that. There we go. Now you might be wondering, those last two ideas also had a parentheses around them, so should there be another comma? Because truthfully, without it, it's really difficult to tell if it's George's major is engineering and George is enrolled in calculus, or George's major is criminal justice and George is not enrolled in calculus. It's hard to know when to take the breath. But I suppose the absence of the comma tells us, oh, this stuff would be continued to be read as one. If we had parentheses in a different location, that might tell us to put a comma there, but we don't, so this is good enough. George's major is engineering and George is enrolled in calculus, or George's major is criminal justice and George is not enrolled in calculus. All right, so that's a translation from symbols to words. Let's look at what you got through for the others, where we go the other direction. Same three ideas. The first one, George is not enrolled in calculus. So which of the five do we have here? I see a negation of an initial idea that we have. I don't see any and connecting anything. I don't see any or connecting anything. I don't see an if this, then this. I don't see a something, if and only if something. So we simply have a negation here. Symbolically, the idea is the opposite of P, so negation P. That's it for that one. The next one, George's major is criminal justice or George's major is not engineering. and George is not enrolled in calculus. So for this one, I see a negation, the opposite of one of the initial ideas. Let me just point out, my initial ideas were all presented in kind of a positive way. George is enrolled, his major is this, his major is this. But an initial idea could be presented as George is not in calculus. And then the opposite of that would be George is in calculus. So just keep that in mind. All right, so we see a negation. I also see the word or connecting two ideas. So we have a disjunction. And I see the word and on its own, connecting two ideas. So we have a conjunction. And then let's decide which of these is the main idea. The negation's only applied to something individually, so it's not that. The question is disjunction or conjunction. And since there's a comma here, this tells me all this stuff is read together. So the or is pulling together two ideas that are supposed to be read together. The and is pulling together the big idea of the sentence. So the conjunction is the big picture. Down symbol. Let's write it here. Okay, so what comes before the and? George's major is criminal justice, or George's major is not engineering. George's major is criminal justice is Q, or George's major is not engineering is negation R. And since those two things are supposed to be read together, there's a comma there telling you parentheses is going to be in place. Those two ideas go in parentheses. And then after the and, George is enrolled in calculus is idea P. And the last one, if George is not enrolled in calculus, then George's major is not engineering or George's major is criminal justice. Forgive my missed comma placement. Okay, so we see a negation. There's not enrolled in calculus. That's the opposite of our initial idea. I see an or, so a disjunction. And I see an if-then, so a conditional. And then decide what's the main idea of the sentence. Is the main idea if this, then something else? Or is the main idea this or this? Big picture, it's the if something, then something else. So the conditional is the big picture. Conditional is the arrow going in one direction. So what comes before the arrow? If George is not enrolled in calculus. So negation P. Then what comes after that? There are two ideas that come after it. Excuse me. George's major is not engineering or George's major is criminal justice. So that's in parentheses. Major is not engineering is negation R. Or, up symbol, major is criminal justice. Q. Okay, looks good. Okay, so in this video, we looked at kind of the overall initial look at logic. We saw the 5 connectives that we're going to see throughout the chapter, and then we started looking at the translations back and forth. Moving forward from here, we'll start to build the truth tables for each of these 5, and then bring it all together, big picture, to be able to analyze real situations and real statements. I'll see you soon for another video.